fire never lies, and the flames scorching the ground in front of Marcus Kane's farmhouse heralded the beginning of a story he'd refused to see for 10 years. In the July heat with the sun overhead, nothing should have disturbed this silence, just the distant sounds of cattle and wind rustling through dry grass. But there she was, at the base of his fence, her white dress turned crimson with blood, breathing shallow and pained, alive but barely. Marcus stood 10 paces away, rifle held loose, watching her. The woman couldn't be more than 25, black hair matted with sweat and dirt against her face. Her hands pressed against her side where the fabric had torn and blood had seeped through. She hadn't noticed him yet. Eyes closed, face pale as morning frost. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, walk back to the house, pretend he'd never seen her. In his experience, helping strangers only brought trouble. And trouble was the one thing Marcus Kane had sworn 10 years ago to never invite back into his life. But the woman shifted against the fence. A small sound escaped her lips, pain mixed with exhaustion. That sound cut through 10 years of carefully built walls. He found himself taking a step forward, then another. She opened her eyes when his shadow fell across her. Green eyes, sharp despite the pain, and they fixed on him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope that made his chest tighten. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper he couldn't quite catch. Marcus crouched down, keeping the rifle across his knees, maintaining distance even as he moved closer. This close, he could see the extent of her injuries. Cuts on her arms, bruising along her jaw, and that wound on her side that had soaked through her dress. Someone had hurt her badly. "Please," she said, her voice cracked and raw. "They're coming." Those 2 words changed everything. Because if someone was coming, if someone was hunting this woman, then Marcus's 10 years of peace were about to end whether he helped her or not. So what would you have done? Would you fight for a woman you didn't know, or would you think of your own safety? Write in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose. Because the decision Marcus was about to make would determine whether either of them lived to see sunset. Marcus's first instinct was to leave her there. His second was to help. His third, the one that won, was to get answers before either option got him killed. "Who's coming?" he asked, glancing toward the horizon where dust clouds could hide approaching riders. The woman tried to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement pulled at her wounds. "Men from Crimson Valley. 3 of them, maybe 4. They've been tracking me since yesterday." Crimson Valley. Marcus knew the place. A settlement 35 miles south known for 2 things: gold mining and the kind of men who ask no questions about a person's past. If she'd run from there, she'd either stolen something valuable or witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see. "What did you do?" The question came out harder than he intended, but 10 years of isolation had worn away most of his social graces. Her eyes flashed with something between anger and hurt. "What makes you think I did anything wrong?" "Because innocent people don't usually end up bleeding against my fence posts with killers on their trail." She looked away, her jaw tightening for a moment. Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke so quietly he had to lean closer to hear. "I saw them murder a family. The Morrisons. They had a claim near the valley. Found something worth killing for." Her hands trembled as she pressed them tighter against her side. "I was there to buy supplies. Wrong place, wrong time. They tried to kill me too, to silence the only witness." Marcus studied her face, looking for the tells that would mark her as a liar. He'd gotten good at reading people in his years before the isolation had to be in his line of work. But her eyes held steady, and the tremor in her voice sounded like trauma, not deception. "So you ran," he said. "What else was I supposed to do? Stay and let them silence the only witness?" She met his gaze again. "They killed a whole family over whatever the Morrisons found. You think they'd hesitate to kill one more person?" A sound drifted across the plains, distant but unmistakable. Hoofbeats, multiple horses riding hard. Marcus rose to his feet, rifle ready, eyes scanning the horizon. There, maybe 2 miles out, a dust cloud moving fast toward his property. 4 riders, just like she'd said. The woman, he still didn't know her name, struggled to stand, using the fence for support. "Please," she whispered. "I won't bring you trouble. Just point me toward water and I'll keep running." But Marcus was already calculating. 4 armed men, probably desperate to cover their tracks. If they'd kill a family for whatever the Morrisons had found, they wouldn't leave witnesses. And now that they'd tracked her to his land, he was already involved, whether he liked it or not. The hoofbeats were getting closer. In less than 10 minutes, those riders would crest the hill and see his ranch. They'd see her. They'd see him. And Marcus Kane would have to decide whether 10 years of peaceful isolation was worth dying for. Marcus made his decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Not because he was brave, and certainly not because he was foolish. He made it because he recognized something in the woman's eyes, the same desperate, cornered look he'd seen in his own mirror 10 years ago. "Can you walk?" he asked, already moving. She nodded, though the way she gripped the fence post suggested walking would be more hope than reality. "My name's Elena Valdez," she said as he slipped an arm around her waist, supporting her weight. "Marcus Kane, and you're about to get very well acquainted with my root cellar." The cellar was his insurance policy, a hidden space beneath the kitchen floor where he'd stored emergency supplies, and if he was honest, where he'd planned to hide if his past ever caught up with him. He'd never imagined hiding someone else. As they hurried toward the house, Elena stumbled, her legs giving out. Without thinking, Marcus swept her up, carrying her the remaining distance. She was lighter than he'd expected, fragile in a way that made his chest tighten with an emotion he'd buried years ago. The hoofbeats were louder now, close enough that he could distinguish individual horses. Inside the house, Marcus set Elena down and pulled up the concealed trap door. The cellar was small but well stocked. Water, dried food, medical supplies. He'd learned the value of preparation the hard way. "There's bandages down there," he said, helping her down the ladder. "Tend your wounds. Stay quiet no matter what you hear." Elena grabbed his wrist before he could close the door. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Don't know if I'm telling the truth." Marcus looked down at her upturned face, saw the genuine confusion there. How long had it been since someone had shown her kindness without expecting something in return? "Maybe I recognize the look of someone running from something they can't fight," he said quietly. "Maybe I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go." Before she could respond, he closed the trap door and scattered the rug back over it. The approaching horses were maybe a minute out now. He could hear them clearly. 4 riders, just as Elena had said, their mounts breathing hard from a long chase. Marcus checked his rifle, then moved to the window. The riders topped the hill in a cloud of dust and fury, spreading out as they approached his property. Hard men with harder faces, the kind who wore their violence like other men wore hats. The leader, a tall man with a scar running from his ear to his jaw, raised his hand, bringing the group to a halt 50 yards from the house. Even at that distance, Marcus could see the cold calculation in the man's eyes. "You Kane," the scarred man called out. Marcus stepped onto his porch, rifle held casually but ready. "Depends who's asking. Name's Jake Steele. We're tracking a woman. Dangerous criminal. You seen anyone come through here?" And there it was. The lie that would force Marcus to choose between his safety and his conscience, because he could see in Steele's eyes that this man had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. Marcus had lied before. During the war, after the war, in the dark years that followed when truth was a luxury he couldn't afford. But standing on his porch facing Jake Steele, he realized this lie would cost him everything he'd built. "Haven't seen a soul in weeks," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the weight of the rifle in his hands. "Gets lonely out here, but that's how I like it." Steele's eyes narrowed, scanning the property with the thoroughness of a man who'd tracked prey before. His gaze lingered on the fence posts where Elena's blood had dried dark against the weathered wood. "Funny thing," Steele said, dismounting with practiced ease, "we followed her trail right to your property line. Blood trail too. Woman was hurt bad when she passed through." The other 3 riders spread out, not threatening exactly, but positioned like men who knew how confrontations ended. Marcus recognized the formation. He'd used it himself in another life. "Blood could be from anything," Marcus replied. "Coyotes hunt through here Maybe your woman tangled with something with teeth." Steele smiled, but it was the kind of smile that preceded violence. "Mind if we take a look around, just to ease our minds?" It wasn't a request. Marcus could see that in the way Steele's hand rested near his gun, in the way the other men watched his every movement. They'd search his property whether he agreed or not. The only question was whether they'd kill him first or after. "Free country," Marcus said, stepping aside. "Though I'd appreciate you not disturbing my cattle. They spook easy." As Steele approached the porch, Marcus caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. Mud on the man's boots. But not just any mud. The distinctive red clay that only came from one place in this territory. The same clay that covered the Morrison property near Crimson Valley. Elena had been telling the truth. Steele wasn't just a killer. This was a man who enjoyed his work. "Nice place you got here, Kane," Steele said, his eyes taking in every detail of the house. "Quiet, private, the kind of place where a man could hide things. Or people." "I'm a simple rancher," Marcus replied. "Don't have much use for hiding anything. Simple rancher." Steele chuckled. "That's what they all say. But you know what I think? I think you got secrets, Kane. I can smell them on you." One of the other riders called out from near the barn. "Jake, found fresh horse tracks. Someone was here recent." Marcus's mind raced. Those would be his own tracks from this morning's ride to check the fence line. But Steele wouldn't know that, and in his current mood, the man was likely to assume the worst. Steele's hand moved closer to his gun. "Thought you said you hadn't seen anyone." "I said I hadn't seen a soul. Didn't say I hadn't left my own property." Marcus kept his voice level, but his finger found the trigger of his rifle. "Rode out to check my fence line this morning. Found some posts damaged. Probably the same animal that left that blood." For a long moment the two men stared at each other. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment, the terrible balance between truth and lies, between safety and catastrophe. Then Steele smiled again, and Marcus knew that whatever happened next, his 10 years of peace were about to end in violence. The tension broke when Steele stepped onto the porch uninvited. That single act crossed a line Marcus had drawn in blood 10 years ago. No one entered his sanctuary without permission. "Let's have that look inside," Steele said, his hand now resting openly on his gun. Marcus raised his rifle an inch, not quite a threat but close enough to make his position clear. "I'd rather you didn't." Wasn't asking. Steele's three men moved closer. Their intentions were written in the way they positioned themselves. This was about to become a fight, and they all knew it. But before anyone could draw, a new sound cut through the tension. Hoofbeats approaching fast from the east, a single rider pushing his horse hard across the open ground. Steele cursed under his breath, his attention divided between Marcus and the approaching stranger. In that moment of distraction, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that made his heart sink. One of Steele's men was studying the ground near the porch, following a trail Marcus couldn't see but knew was there. Droplets of Elena's blood leading toward the house. The approaching rider topped the ridge, and Marcus could see him clearly now. A young man, maybe 25, with the kind of desperate urgency that came from carrying bad news. He pulled up hard in front of the group, his horse lathered and breathing heavy. "Jake," the young man called out, "we got problems back in Crimson Valley. Sheriff's asking questions about the Morrison place." Someone tipped him off. Steele's face went dark with rage. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that end with a rope." The young man's eyes darted to Marcus, then back to Steele. "We need to ride now." For a moment, Marcus thought salvation had arrived, that Steele would be forced to abandon his search and deal with the larger threat. But then Steele's gaze fell on those drops of blood leading to the house, and his expression shifted to something infinitely more dangerous. "Tommy," Steele said to the man tracking the blood trail, "what did you find?" Tommy pointed toward the house. "Blood trail leads right to the front door. She's here." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His deception had been discovered, and now 4 armed killers stood between him and the woman he'd sworn to protect. Worse, they were desperate men facing a hangman's noose if they didn't silence every witness. If you were Marcus, what would you do? Fight 4 armed men to protect a woman you barely know, or try to negotiate your way out and hope they spare both your lives? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose, because what Marcus decided next would determine whether either of them lived to see sunset. Steele drew his gun with practiced speed. "Bring her out, Kane. Do it now, and maybe we'll make this quick for both of you." But Marcus was already moving. 10 years of isolation stripped away in an instant, revealing the man he'd been before, a man who'd learned that sometimes the only choice was to fight. Marcus's rifle cracked like thunder, and Tommy dropped before his gun cleared leather. The shot echoed across the plains like judgment, and suddenly the quiet ranch became a battlefield. Steele dove behind his horse as Marcus's second shot splintered the porch post where his head had been. The other two men scattered, seeking cover behind the water trough and barn wall. Years of muscle memory kicked in. Marcus's hands worked the rifle action smooth and fast, just like he'd learned in the war, just like he'd hoped never to use again. "You picked the wrong side, Kane," Steele shouted from behind his horse. "All this for some woman you don't even know." Marcus didn't waste breath on an answer. He put a round through the water trough, sending the man behind it scrambling for better cover. The messenger, young and clearly unused to gunfights, had wheeled his horse and was riding hard back toward the ridge, apparently deciding that whatever waited in dead rock was preferable to Marcus's rifle. Smart kid. Steele appeared around his horse's flank, pistol blazing. Bullets chewed splinters from the porch railing as Marcus dropped flat, rolling behind the heavy wooden bench he'd built for quiet evenings he'd never have again. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Marcus counted shots, calculated angles, tried to remember everything he'd learned about staying alive when outnumbered. Then he heard it, the trapdoor creaking open. "Don't," he called out, but it was too late. Elena's voice drifted up from the cellar, weak but determined. "Let me help. I can shoot. Stay down," Marcus hissed, but she was already climbing up, a pistol in her hand, Marcus's spare Colt that he'd kept in the emergency supplies. Steele heard the exchange and laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "That's right, girl. Come on out. Let's finish what we started at the Morrison place." Elena appeared beside Marcus, her face pale but her hand steady on the gun. "They killed a child," she whispered to Marcus. "Emma Morrison. She was only 7 years old. Murdered her because she saw them kill her parents." The words hit Marcus like bullets. A 7-year-old child. Suddenly this wasn't about protecting a stranger anymore. It was about justice for the innocents these men had butchered. "How many rounds you got?" Marcus asked. "5 in the gun plus whatever's in your belt." Marcus checked his rifle. 3 rounds left against Steele and 2 experienced killers. It wouldn't be enough for a straight fight, but then he remembered something. The old mining explosive he kept in the barn for clearing stumps. Dangerous to store but effective for more than just moving rocks. "Can you keep them busy for 2 minutes?" he asked. Elena nodded, though sweat beaded her forehead from pain and effort. "What are you planning?" "Something stupid." Marcus checked the distance to the barn. 30 yards of open ground where any of the 3 men could cut him down, but maybe stupid enough to work. He looked at this woman he'd known for less than an hour, this stranger who'd brought violence back into his carefully ordered world. She could have stayed hidden, could have let him face this alone. Instead, she'd chosen to stand with him. "Ready?" he asked. Elena positioned herself at the corner of the porch, Colt steady in her hands. "For Emma Morrison." Marcus sprinted toward the barn as Elena opened fire, her shots forcing Steele and his men to keep their heads down. But 30 yards had never seemed so far, and Marcus knew that any second, one of those killers would risk Elena's bullets for a clean shot at his back. Marcus's boots hit the barn floor as a bullet whistled past his ear, close enough to feel the heat. Behind him, Elena's Colt barked steadily, keeping the killers honest. He dove toward the corner where he kept the mining supplies, hands searching frantically for the small wooden box marked with skull and crossbones. There, 2 sticks of dynamite, fuses intact, enough explosive to level half the barn or turn the tide of this fight. His fingers found the matches as another bullet punched through the barn wall, showering him with splinters. Outside, Elena's shooting had stopped. Either she was reloading or she was down. Marcus didn't have time to find out which. He lit the first fuse with shaking hands, the spark catching with a sharp hiss. 20 seconds, maybe 30 before it blew. He sprinted back toward the barn door, dynamite in one hand, rifle in the other. Elena was still alive, crouched behind the porch railing with blood running down her arm from a fresh graze. She saw him emerge from the barn and nodded. She understood what he was planning. Steele's voice rang out across the ranch. "Give it up, Kane. You're outgunned and outmanned. Send the girl out and maybe I'll let you live." Instead of answering, Marcus hurled the dynamite toward the water trough where 2 of Steele's men had taken cover. The stick tumbled end over end, fuse sparking like a fallen star. The explosion shattered the morning air, sending dirt and debris skyward in a massive geyser. When the dust cleared, one of Steele's men was motionless on the ground. The other was crawling away, stunned and bleeding. But Steele himself had used the chaos to advance, and suddenly he was at the porch steps, gun trained on Elena All's head. "Drop it, Kane." Steele's face was a mask of rage and desperation. "Drop it or I paint your porch with her brains." Marcus froze, rifle halfway to his shoulder. 30 feet separated him from Steele, but it might as well have been 30 miles. At this range, the killer couldn't miss. Elena looked at Marcus across that impossible distance, and he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. Not fear, acceptance. She'd made peace with dying, probably made it back in Crimson Valley when she decided to be the witness these killers couldn't silence. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't let him win." But Steele was already squeezing the trigger when the second stick of dynamite, the one Marcus had lit but kept hidden behind his back, rolled to a stop at the killer's feet. Steele's eyes went wide as he realized what was happening. He had perhaps 3 seconds to choose between shooting Elena and diving for cover. He chose wrong. The blast lifted Steele off his feet and hurled him backward, his gun spinning away into the dust. When the ringing in Marcus's ears faded, the ranch was silent except for the wind and the distant lowing of spooked cattle. Elena was alive, shaken but breathing. Steele lay motionless near the shattered remains of the porch steps. The surviving gunman had disappeared entirely, probably deciding that whatever the sheriff in Dead Rock might do to him was preferable to facing more explosives. Marcus walked slowly to where Elena sat, his rifle still ready but no longer needed. "Is it over?" she asked. Marcus surveyed his destroyed ranch, the shattered porch, the crater where his water trough used to be, the blood soaking into earth that had known only peace for 10 years. "Yeah," he said, reaching down to help her stand. "It's over." 3 days later, Sheriff Davidson arrived from Crimson Valley with a posse and questions. He found Marcus repairing his porch while Elena sat nearby, her wounds healing but her presence permanent in ways neither of them had planned. Davidson was a good man, honest in a territory where honesty was often fatal. He listened to their story, examined the bodies, and nodded when Marcus handed over the gold ore that Steele had been carrying, evidence of the strike that had gotten the Morrison family killed. "Morrison's found a vein worth killing for," Davidson explained, hefting the ore sample. "Steele and his crew figured they could eliminate the family and claim the strike for themselves. They almost got away with it." The sheriff's eyes lingered on Elena, taking in her healing injuries and the determined set of her jaw. "You willing to testify in court about what you saw?" "Every word," Elena replied without hesitation. "Emma Morrison deserves that much." Davidson nodded and turned to Marcus. "And you? You've got quite a reputation from your war days. Some folks might wonder why a man with your skills chose to hide out here for so long." Marcus's hands stilled on the wood he was planing. "Sometimes a man needs to find peace before he can make it for others." "Well, you made plenty of peace here. Steele's gang was terrorizing half the territory. Word's already spreading about what happened. You might find folks coming by to shake your hand." The thought of visitors of his isolation being permanently broken should have filled Marcus with dread. Instead, he found himself glancing at Elena, who was watching him with something that looked like hope. After Davidson and his posse left, taking the bodies and their grim evidence, Marcus and Elena sat on the partially rebuilt porch as sunset painted the sky in shades of fire. "You could go anywhere now," Marcus said quietly. "Davidson offered to escort you to Denver, help you start fresh where nobody knows your story." Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching the cattle move across the pasture in the dying light. "And you, what will you do? Same as always, I suppose. Work the ranch, tend the cattle." He paused, then looked at her directly. "Though it occurs to me that this place could use a woman's touch, and maybe some extra hands for the work. Are you offering me a job, Marcus Kane? I'm offering you a home if you want it." Elena's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I've been running for so long, I'd forgotten what home felt like." "It feels like this," Marcus said, and for the first time in 10 years he meant it. 6 months later, travelers passing through the territory would tell stories of the peaceful ranch where a scarred man and a green-eyed woman built something beautiful from the ashes of violence. They raised cattle and children, welcomed strangers, and never spoke of the day when blood on fence posts changed everything. Marcus kept his rifle cleaned and ready, but he never had to use it again. Some battles, once won, stay won. And some peace, once earned, lasts forever. The ranch that had sheltered one broken soul became a sanctuary for two healing hearts, proving that sometimes the best things in life begin with the courage to help a stranger in need. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel now. Click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one. More intense, more profound, the kind that makes your soul pause and your heart race. And tell me in the comments, if you were in Marcus's place, would you have done the same? Would you risk your life for someone you didn't know? Because sometimes the greatest adventures come from the most unexpected strangers who show up at our door.